we're in the unit measurements and densities. Density is a measurement that we take on substances. It's a physical property. When we do it, we don't change the substance. Okay, and you guys should be taking notes. Okay, and density is about how much stuff fits in the same volume. And now we've already discussed solids, liquids, and gases. Our solids are packed tighter, so usually if we're comparing the exact same substance, solids are more dense than gas. Why? Because we can put more stuff in the same space. When we're comparing different kinds of solids, we're going to talk about mass per volume. So how much mass is in the same volume? So let's take a bowl full of styrofoam balls. They don't weigh a lot. Let's take that same size bowl and fill it up with change. That's metal. That would weigh much more. It's the same volume because our bowl is the same size, but the mass is much more in the change. So that would be more dense. Okay, so some of you may be wondering why. And the first thing to note is physically, styrofoam balls also have pockets of air. But chemically, different kinds of atoms weigh more due to protons and neutrons, and we're going to get into that in the next unit. So density is mass, and our units for mass can be grams, it could be kilograms, it could be other things, but for right now we usually use grams. And our volume is usually milliliters if it's a liquid, okay? And cubic centimeters if it's a solid. And you may remember in math that when you measure the volume of a cube, it is length times width times height. That's centimeter times centimeter times centimeter. That's why that's centimeter cubed. When we use this mathematically, you are going to have to solve for other things. You might be given density and mass, and then you would have to solve for volume. I picked this one because people have difficulty. They try to get volume alone here. If I get volume alone here, it's really 1 over volume. See how it is in the denominator. I need to get that in the numerator. So how would I do that? I multiply both sides by my volume. This is your algebra, okay? My volume goes away, and now I have volume times density equals mass. And now that volume's on top, I can get it alone by dividing by density. And this is going to cross out my density there, and volume will be mass over density. So on our worksheet, I will go over the little triangle many of you have seen, and that's a quick way to do that. However, you will have to mathematically rearrange formulas in this class, so get used to that. Okay, we are going to look at this graphically. We would have done a lab with this. Instead, I gave you a virtual exploratory lab. Okay, and so how do we find slope? The slope of a line is the change in y over the change in x. Okay, that's the slope of the graph. Well, if I made the slope, let's just put this up here, density equals mass over volume. If I make my y-axis mass and my x-axis volume, then my slope will equal mass, which is my y, over volume, which is my x, which means my slope will equal the density. Okay, so in science we use a lot of graphing, and this is why we can get a nice slope with different masses and volume of the same substance and calculate the density that way. So there are two ways to find the volume. Mass, of course, we just plop that thing on a scale and we get our mass. If we have a regular object, okay, that's a block, we can do volume equals length times width height. Now, what if we have an irregular object? Okay. Basically, we're going to do displacement by water, and you saw that in your exploratory lab. So here is my graduated cylinder, and say that's 5, that's 10, and let's say, I'm going to make this just very simple, that's 15, that's 20, and right now my water level's at 10, okay, there's my meniscus. Okay, so 10 milliliters of water. And now let's say I put that irregular object in my graduated cylinder, okay, and we have 5, 10, 15, 20, and here's my irregular object. I plopped it in, and now that water level goes up to 20 milliliters with the object. Okay, so our volume is final minus initial. Oops, initial. Okay, so my volume equals my 20 milliliters minus 10 milliliters, and my irregular object is 10 milliliters of volume. Okay, so when you move that block in and out of the tank in your lab, you will see the tank is 100 liters, and then when you submerge the block completely, the water goes up. That is measurement by displacement. That's explained in your lab, and that's basically what we did here. Those are two ways of finding our volume. Okay? What you need to know in my class is how you're going to be graded when you do written math. These are my rules for chemistry, okay? Absolutely no naked numbers. Ask you 10 what? Talking about? No. For our water that we just measured, it was 10 milliliters, okay? So no naked numbers, they must have units. No work, no credit. For anything that you use in an equation, I want the equation written down, numbers plugged in, and the answers with units and chemicals if needed, all right? No naked numbers. Put a hat on your numbers. For example, if I'm finding the density that has a volume of 3 cubic centimeters and 9 grams, my density is mass divided by volume, okay? Here's density. I plug in the 9 grams for my mass and the 3 cubic centimeters for my volume, and that gives me 3 grams per cubic centimeter. That's my density, and this is what it should look like for full credit. You will be doing this for your test. You'll have to upload pictures, so make sure that you're practicing on your homework properly so you will get full credit. So here is your homework. It's a worksheet. You may write 1A and do the problem on paper, and then 1B, 1C, and then write word problems 1, 2, and so on, and then just take a picture and upload it. But for right now, we are going to do this problem together, and I'm going to go over this quick, easy way to see how to rearrange this formula. You may have seen this before. If I want to find density, I cover up density with my finger, and it is mass divided by volume, okay? If I want to find volume, I cover it up with my finger, and it is mass divided by density, okay? If I want to find mass, these two are right next to each other, density times volume. If you need a refresher on this, come back to this video. You have had a lot of videos. You should be taking notes on them and having them out for references for your test. Okay, so right here, it wants me to find mass. And it gives me density and it gives me volume. Okay, so if I cover up mass, mass will equal density times volume, okay? So my mass equals 3.0 grams per milliliter times, and you guys can put a dot there if you want to, times 100 milliliters. Now, notice my milliliters cancel out. Just a reminder, if I have A and I multiply it times B over A, my A's cross out. Units work just like variables in algebra. So, my answer, mass equals 300 grams. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to double check. I have one significant figure here, and there is a decimal. Everything to the right counts, so it'd be 2 sig figs. Here I have one significant figure. I don't have a decimal. That is 1 sig fig. I am multiplying. That means I use my lowest number of sig figs, which is 1. Here's my answer. I have 1 sig fig. There's no decimal, so I did that right. You will be graded on significant figures as well here. Okay, so just to get you going, B, density equals what? Density equals mass over volume. Then plug in your numbers, then give me your answer with units. Okay, these are word problems. They're the same thing. 15.0 milliliters, this is my volume. And grams, that's my mass. So you can label what that is, and it asks for the density. Density equals mass divided by volume. Plug in your numbers, solve units with significant figures. This has 3 sig figs, and this has 1 and everything to the right because I have a decimal, also 3 sig figs. 3 sig figs. So my answer is going to have to contain 3 significant figures. Work on this during class so you can ask me for help. I'm there for the whole class period.